Good evening, Chelsea fans, and welcome to episode 14 of Chelsea Waves. 4 wins in five under Liam Rosenior has lifted the mood at the bridge ahead of another pivotal week to come in two competitions. We'll be reviewing Sunday's win over Crystal Palace in the Premier League before jumping into a bumper Champions League section in which we'll review last week's narrow 1-0 win over Pafos and preview this Wednesday's Champions League clash away to Napoli. We'll then be joined by Iron Alex Light for the opposition view ahead of Saturday's London derby under the lights at the bridge against West Ham. Let's jump into it. Crystal Palace 1, Chelsea 3. An important 3 points for us against an admittedly struggling side, but one we've not actually had much success against in recent years. We had the early blow with the team news that Palmer was going to be ruled out this one with his ongoing injury problems. But we saw Esteban really step up to the occasion here expertly to put us 1-0 up towards the end of the first half. And actually, George, some pragmatism I think we saw from Liam Rosenior in terms of the setup and in particular the midfield. Talk us through this one.
It was a very satisfying Sunday afternoon, wasn't it? Few and far between in recent months. But it was just about everything we called for in last week's pod, including a 3-1 prediction. We saw pragmatism, crucially, as you say, with that three-man midfield. Esteval starting and thriving, as requested. And for me, perhaps most importantly, João given that number 9 berth once again and backing up his goal against Brentford with a top finish here. I thought while that first half showing was far from perfect, the key was the respect that we paid to the opposition with the deployment of that midfield three. So we had Santos and Enzo much closer to Caicedo. We competed first, we kept it tight beyond the Badiashile gaff and ultimately earned the right to play. The first goal came, admittedly with some fortune, but the game then opens up. So really positive to see. I thought the Brazilians were absolutely phenomenal. João back in that white away kit that you're donning right now, but that we wore, it felt consistently at the Club World Cup, channeled those top level performances that really promised us the world. Beyond the goal, which was brilliant, cutting inside and lashing home, just his hold up play, his energy. Back to full fitness, there were concerns that he was managing issues. We saw Santos, the unsung hero of this game for me, mopping up on multiple occasions. I think there was a Munoz cross that he was brilliantly placed to deny Brennan Johnson. And then Esteval, electric as ever. Just we've called for it on multiple occasions. Simply has to start whenever available. Clearly, in Cole's absence, our most potent attacker. And for me, if you're good enough, you're old enough.
Some slightly odd choices, I think, towards the top end of the pitch, George, and we obviously spent a fortune on bolstering our left wing options over the summer in the form of Alejandro Garnacho and Jamie Gittins, both of whom we are basically certain are not going to cut it for us. And as a result, we're now seeing Pedro Neto being deployed as a left winger, which looks uncomfortable at best, doesn't it?
I think criticism of Neto is probably the one negative that I've seen consistently on the timeline. Does slightly feel like he's been hanging out to dry. There's not many left-footed right wingers who are competent on their left-hand side. We have actually seen Esteval show some really promising stints there, but it's clearly not where he's most productive. But ultimately, as you say, I think you can read more into how little Rosenior rates options in Garnacho, but particularly Gittins. I fancy Garnacho to play in that game against Napoli, a couple of goals recently against Arsenal. And Gittins, yes, recovering from a virus, but really needs to make a mark before we start talking of a potential departure or loan deal in the summer.
Yeah. Gone are the days of Florent Malouda or Ryan Giggs, hugging the touchline as a left-footed left winger. I think the preference very much for the modern attacking player is to have the option to cut in on your stronger foot, and I think it's not just Pedro Neto who suffers from that. We even saw Saka being pushed there for Arsenal towards the end of their loss yesterday against Man United. Madueke has been deployed there for Arsenal as well as Chelsea previously and been totally ineffective as well. So I do think it is just the the way the game is these days that forwards don't thrive when they don't have that option to cut in on their stronger foot, and it ends up being quite predictable in terms of their attacking play.
I think as you say, it speaks volumes. Those individuals that can operate on both wings effectively. I mentioned Esteval, the likes of Ousmane Dembele, even Semenyo recently. It's got to be a serious caliber of player. But beyond that Neto call on the left wing, I think both with Rosenia and even Carrick against Arsenal, just reverting to type, playing players in positions that they're familiar with, yields positive results, positive output. I thought everyone beyond Neto looked really comfortable and assured. No real major tweaks, not trying to be too fancy, too philosophical, Rosenia, just back to basics, a classic away showing with a three-man midfield, solid with attacking outlets, and ultimately a really nice win for Chelsea.
Couple of red flags towards the end of that game, George. Obviously, Crystal Palace down to 10 men following the dismissal of Adam Wharton would throw a second yellow for his tackle on Moises Caicedo towards the end of the second half. And then somehow we saw momentum seem to swing back in favour of the beleaguered home side, which I did find quite concerning, and I do believe was a product of some of the substitutions we saw. I think Caicedo went off, understandably, given the fact that he's probably needs a rest ahead of the Napoli game. He's already on a yellow card. But I think the introduction of, I think it was Hato into central midfield and Wesley Fofana at right back just felt a bit odd and disjointed, didn't it? It seemed to throw our style and our team generally out of kilter towards the end of that match.
My prediction may have cashed in, but as you said, the clean sheet denial was the one chink in the armor come that game, and you saw how fuming Sanchez was right at the end. I thought that was really great to see. Real passion from him, real anger at that concession. But as you say, pressure was building. I think that was resultant to those changes. We did see in Maresca-esque fashion fullbacks. I think Gusto as well was
Yeah.
featuring in midfield. But I'll give Rosenia a bye here. Clearly, there is a need to manage. Caicedo was on the yellow card. With 3-0 up away from home, Palace look done and dusted. So I'll give it the benefit of the doubt here and say that it was the right call to now prioritise an upcoming tough Champions League game. Chelsea won, Pafos 0. Fair few gripes following this one, a few of them potentially dispelled by that promising performance at Selhurst Park. But ultimately, it took Chelsea 77 minutes to break through against the Cypriot side, and it required Super Moises leaping like a salmon to head home in unlikely fashion. How did you see this one, Ryan?
Yeah, there was a lot of negativity, I think, coming into this fixture, and such as the nature of social media these days, there was quite a relentless flurry of Liam Rosenior memes, images, quite salacious gossip in the press and social media, practically taking the piss out of everything he was saying in his interviews pre-match, and rumors of him not wearing gloves and deploying Lego-based activities for team bonding, all sorts coming out in the press. But in terms of matters on the pitch, this was very much a must-win game for Chelsea in the context of obviously the Champions League table and this being one of our easiest games on paper. But I think anyone who had done a slight bit of research into the opposition, Pafos, knew that they were unlikely to be mugs, having already accrued 6 points until that point with results against Villarreal and Monaco leading up to the match against Chelsea. And we very much expected them to set up how we don't particularly like opposition teams to do so, sort of ultra defensive approach, as it resulted with 8 players practically camped in their own half, a very limited space for Chelsea's players to operate within, and most of our chances really for the first half being constrained to long shots and ricochets from crosses coming into the box. So it proved to be a monumental struggle, and the longer that game went on, there was a real ominous feeling that this was going to be one of those, you know, terrible results that casts a new wave of uncertainty around the manager, but got the job done in the end. I think given our knowledge of the opposition and the fact they were going to set up quite so defensively, I think the wing pairing that we chose here with Garnacho and Neto was absolutely the wrong choice against that low block. Neither of them seem particularly capable of dribbling or drawing defenders and going around them. I think their game is actually much better suited to counter-attack style football against probably higher profile opposition. And so, in hindsight, I probably would have preferred to have seen, a Jamie Gittins who I don't particularly rate at all, but at least has the ability to dribble past players as we saw and draw opponents in, and absolutely Esteval who came on and changed the game for Chelsea and allowed us to generate that sustained pressure, which ultimately resulted in our winner from Moises Caicedo from the corner. Couple of points to flag from this game. I think Liam Delap, we saw him entering the press conference with Liam Rosenior. Quite a dystopian scene actually for Chelsea, seeing that tweet. Liam Rosenior and Liam Delap taking the press conference for Chelsea in the Champions League felt a bit like a comedy skit if you'd have looked at that a couple of years ago, but when they were both in the Championship for Hull. But yeah, real struggles as it resulted for Delap again here. And I think the real feature that we see from him, we see occasional flashes of inspiration and good hold up play from him because he is a very physical player. But I couldn't count on one hand the amount of chances he's had as a Chelsea player so far. He's obviously had the goal against Fulham. There was one against Barcelona when they were down to 10 men and practically beaten. But I find it really unusual that he doesn't even get goal scoring opportunities in this team. I can't remember one, two, three squandered opportunities from him. So we don't really know how good his finishing is, and his all round play is not good enough to justify that. For all his faults, Nicholas Jackson, he was the king of profligacy in front of goal, but he always inevitably seemed to be on the end of chances and in hindsight probably generating them for himself. So I'm really curious what the issue here is with Delap. Is it a lack of width in our team and so rare we see a fullback overlapping and actually crossing a ball, which we know he'd like to attack and feed on. There doesn't seem to be many sort of threaded through balls around the defence, particularly against a team like Pafos, where there's such limited space in behind. So that is becoming a bit of an issue. I think we need to do a better job of profiling him, or he needs to step up his game, but it's not quite working for Liam Delap so far at Chelsea.
I think the Delap issue is very much twofold. Ultimately, I apportion most of the blame with the player himself. I think there's an element of belief, confidence lacking. If he's not getting that service, he needs to really demand it. There were, I think, 15 Neto crosses unsuccessful on the timeline. A lot of humiliation his way, but ultimately a few of those watching back, the lap really needs to be peeling off or making a run either near far post to attack those spaces and ultimately get on the end of it. But I do think this game definitely improved in that Palace game. The build up just far too slow, very much Maresca-esque. It's one thing playing around the back with defenders. I understand the lure of trying to draw out a side, but once you draw a side out and those gaps open, you then need to be more direct and play quickly and profit from the space that's ultimately won.
Very much one of those where you need that early goal to cause the opposition team to come out of their shell a little bit, and it felt like it was never going to come. I think there was a couple of unlucky moments within that as well. Enzo Fernandez's goal that was disallowed sort of midway through that first half for a slight push on the big centre back felt very harsh actually. And we obviously saw a handball, a really obvious handball, in fact, not given towards the start of the second half. So yeah, it felt pretty ominous for a while, but job done in the end. Not a match definitely to remember for Chelsea, but it does keep our hopes alive of a top eight automatic finish with that decisive trip away to Antonio Conte's Napoli to come on Wednesday.
I think you say that the key takeaway here more than anything was staving off that ridicule. On paper, on social media, anything less than 3 points here would have been disastrous. But ultimately, in terms of qualification for the top eight, I think we're going to talk in the upcoming section about the merits of that top eight and generally the revised format. But actually, goal difference here could have been crucial. If we're going to place huge importance in that top eight position, I'm now looking at 13 sides in contention. and a couple of those sides below us have far easier fixtures than Napoli upcoming. So it could potentially one that comes back to bite us. So Napoli await on Wednesday. Chelsea finally poised in this revised 36 team Champions League, I guess, no longer a group phase. How do you see this one against Conte, former Chelsea champion, and also the returning Lukaku amongst other high-profile Premier League players?
Yeah, I mean, this was definitely one of the more daunting ties, I think, when the fixtures came out, given the fact that Napoli away is one of those notoriously difficult places to go and play as an opposition team with that sort of, old-fashioned stadium, the cauldron-like atmosphere, which is quite akin domestically to a St. James's Park, where we know Chelsea and the young teams in particular for Chelsea tend to sort of wilt and get swallowed by the atmosphere and the occasion. This game looks like a really interesting one on paper, about practically a shootout between Chelsea and Napoli for qualification here, but in different ways. Obviously, Chelsea needing a win to secure automatic qualification through the top eight, and Napoli, as a result of having fallen short against 10-man Copenhagen in the last game, and now needing a win to stay in the competition entirely. So you mentioned the obviously the additional subplots to this fixture. Always love a couple of those returning managers and fixtures in the form of Lukaku and Antonio Conte, two individuals that I'm sure would love nothing more than to get one over their former side. And obviously Kevin De Bruyne as well, who I'm not sure if he's going to be fit for this, but is another former Chelsea player to add into that equation as well. With all of that said, I don't think that this is a Napoli team that we necessarily need to fear. Whilst the occasion itself will be daunting for the team and the atmosphere will be electric, the team itself, I think, is absolutely nothing to be fearful of. We just saw them have a 3-0 loss on Sunday evening to a pretty mediocre Juventus side. So struggling domestically, and we're well aware of Antonio Conte's track record in Europe, which is diabolical, frankly. I don't think he's ever got past a quarter final for any team and seems to consistently prioritize domestic success over anything on the continent. So I think on paper this looks like a tricky fixture for us, but one we should absolutely go into with confidence and take it in our stride. I think with the exception of probably McTominay, who scored quite a few goals, I think, against Chelsea previously and represents a real physical presence and would expect lots of balls to be pumped to him and towards sort of the edge of the box and in the box itself, where he has thrived against Chelsea before. So that will be one to be wary of, and we will need that physical presence. I don't particularly want to see Wesley Fofana clowning around in this game and trying to wrestle with McTominay or Lukaku. In fact, I think we'd be much better suited to even a Badi Shil or a Josh Ashupong, who we've seen deal with physical opposition before in the form of a sort of prime Jean-Philippe Mateta before. So will be interesting to see what happens in terms of the lineup defensively for that and whether we do rotate from Sunday. So yeah, I think this is a game we definitely need to enter with a bit more of a spring in our step now after 4 wins in five. And the point around the starting 11 is an interesting one. Do you think, George, we just go again with the starting 11 from Palace and build on that momentum, or a couple of additions there maybe?
Personally, I'd love to see the same 11, but I think Rosenior in the week has doubled down on his assertion that he, in the guise of trusting the whole squad, he is committed to rotating. Whether that's, say, meddling interference from above, medical staff, etc., I very much expect changes here. And ultimately, I think that could be us shooting ourselves in the foot. You mentioned Conte's poor European record. They're 25th for a reason, struggling even on the domestic front, which is rare for Conte. So should be ripe for a strong showing. But that Achilles heel could well be rotation. I actually think this game could be seriously sort of emblematic for Rosenior, coming up against the archetypal Roman Abramovich manager. Came in season one, quick fix, wholesale tweak, doubled down and won Chelsea the league. So despite I think Diego Costa slagging him off in the week, a lot of talk around his prickly demeanour, essentially self-preservation in that second season where we ultimately left, but he holds a place in the Chelsea faithful's heart. So I think this would be a really good chance for Rosenia to get one up on the old guard, that old regime, and dispel some of those Roman Abramovich chants.
Feels like
You
it
know,
could be a bit of a make or break stroke catapult moment for Liam Rosenior, doesn't it? All the memes as of him as a Lego man or Will from In Betweeners can be dispelled with a compelling win with conviction over a major European opposition. I think this is a great opportunity for him and this young team to really announce ourselves again following the recent turmoil. How do you see this one going, George? I've gone for a very optimistic 3-0 win to Chelsea with Esteban to start and put us into the lead, followed by goals by Pedro Neto and Joao Pedro to seal this one.
very punchy, almost shades of that rare Graham Potter win away at the San Siro. Given Blue Coast Chelsea seem to relish rotation, I'm going to call a 2-2 draw at the Diego Armando Maradona Stadium with a febrile, hostile atmosphere proving too much for Chelsea in the early stages. I'm going to call a Lukaku goal against his former club. Chelsea can then get to grips with the game. I think ultimately taking a lead before McSauce is going to step up late to nod home. Chelsea will progress to the playoff phases, adding yet more fixtures to the already congested pile-up. And I believe this result will also see Napoli progress with yet another season passing and not one side worth their salt being relegated from this league phase.
So we're into the second season of the new Champions League extended format, George, and last season Chelsea were observers from afar, having not been in the competition, but this year we've had a taste of it for ourselves and an eclectic mix of opposition over the course of this group stage format with oppositions such as Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Napoli, all the way through to your Champions League debutants, Pafos. How have you experienced this one?
Emperor's New Clothes for me, a totally diluted product. I think for all the purported excitement of 13 teams in contention for those top eight places going into Wednesday, just about the ideal scenario, they're ultimately competing for a bye, not jeopardy of elimination from a prestigious tournament. I think there's talk of playoffs again and Americanism. This is ultimately just a round of 32 game and those in the top eight getting a bye, which I think feeds into this modern theme, this obsession of managing games, managing a workload, and ultimately just detracts from what was a truly elite competition. I think when that Champions League music came on, there was a real element of excitement. I know that will remain with the players, but some of the atmospheres, these early games, essentially an element of Chelsea tax. We've seen it, we've lived it before, but you're just not seeing that same intensity and excitement for the second year running, 64 additional group stage games, and yet it appears very few, if any, decent sides are set to be flushed. I think Napoli, our opponents upcoming on Wednesday, would represent the first decent side as Serie A champions last year to be flushed in 2 years. But fundamentally, it's a simple formula. You've now got 36 teams with two-thirds, despite 64 extra games progressing. Previously, it was one in two. There's got to be jeopardy in whether a group game, league format. And I actually think a really nice proposal to the existing format, if you want to have the change in opposition, etc., would be reverting to 32 with 16 progressing.
We've had some quite cherished group stages down the years, haven't we, George? I think the one that really sticks out in recent years was under Frank, where we had a really high jeopardy competitive group with the likes of Ajax, that really good Ajax team, actually, not the best version, but I think it was 1 or 2 years after they reached the Champions League semi-final. We had a decent Lille team and Valencia as well, and I think there was so much jeopardy in each of those games, and that is something that has just been completely absent of pretty much every fixture until this point in this extended iteration of the format.
You raise a great point. Ultimately, those games with reverse fixtures become 6 pointers. So not only are you gaining 3 points, but you've got opposition within your group, within a genuine context, losing out on 3 points. Beating Barcelona, they've still got seven other games. There isn't that same damage done, nor that juice of the return tie, and knowing that that away win is so crucial. There's potentially an element of English bias here. I think the fact that all six English sides are in contention of those top eight spots, despite the well-documented toils of ourselves, I mean, particularly Spurs. You look at Spurs well in that picture there. Liverpool as well, in freefall this season. The fact that we're all up there, potentially odds on for four or five of us, if not all six, to make the top eight, definitely detracts from that overall picture for me.
Spurs being in that, likely to be in that top eight is just a dreadful look, not just for, you know, the format itself, but just for the state of European football generally. They've, I don't know if they got these easy fixtures as a result of having won the Europa League and being placed in a preferential pot. I don't think that is the case, to be honest, because Chelsea were in pot one and we've ended up with actually pretty tricky fixtures, probably the trickiest of any of the English clubs so far. But Tottenham, who have they played? I mean, they had one match against PSG that they obviously lost. They had Copenhagen, Monaco, Slavia Prague, and a terrible 10-man Dortmund team. So it just makes a bit of a mockery of the competition and the state of European football generally, I think, as you've said.
You raise another great point. We're ultimately looking at a supercomputer now to make a draw. So the draw itself feels completely flat, inconsequential, lacking juice, potentially even legitimacy. As you say, a random eclectic mix of fixtures that are all splurged out at once, really eating into the tension, the excitement of some of those trips upcoming. I think if we look back to the conception of this revamped format, UEFA were fighting to stave off the very real threat of a European Super League. Efforts were made to appease big clubs, and they ultimately caved to the next closest thing to a franchise model. So, despite all the goal fest, gas, and big mass marketing, we're currently enduring an off season, little more than a stat pad session delivering false bragging rights. As PSG proved last season, coming 15th in the initial league phase, the real competition very much starts next month.
Next for Chelsea in the league is a fixture versus London rivals West Ham at 5:30 this Saturday at the Bridge. And joining us to talk through this is a special debut guest appearance on the pod for Alex Light, aka Techers, lifelong West Ham fan and a huge detractor of Chelsea. Alex, welcome to the pod.
Glad to be here, boys. Thanks for having me on.
So it'd be good just in the first instance to understand what the sort of current sentiment is around West Ham. I mean, clearly things couldn't have gone much worse until this point in the season. Currently languishing in the relegation zone, not completely out of it, but there is on paper a feeling from the outside that the tide is starting to turn under Nuno. But is it too late?
It's a tough one, isn't it, Ryan? I mean, look, we have obviously had a terrible start to the season. This is what, 23 games in, we've got 20 points. And yeah, we've had a couple of wins recently, but look, whenever we're getting these wins, the teams above us are kind of doing similar sort of things. We've had Leeds and Forest above us getting 6 and 4 points respectively during a period when we've got 2 wins. So it kind of seems like even when the tide is potentially starting to turn, we can't really catch a break. And yeah, I mean, look, the sentiment more widely might be that things are starting to turn, but I think, as I said to you before we came on, the damage feels to me like it's done and the writing's on the wall.
What is the gap now? Is it 4 points currently to Forest?
So it's 5 to Forest and Leeds, I think. 5 to Forest, 6 to Leeds, and then if you include our goal difference, which is astronomically bad, it's another point for either of them.
Do you see that as a direct scrap and shootout with Forest then for that final spot towards safety, or do you see others getting dragged into that? I'm particularly referencing the likes of Crystal Palace, whose form has obviously dropped off a cliff, but also Spurs, who I think are only 8 points clear of that drop.
Yeah. Palace and Spurs are 8 points ahead, and as you say, like Palace are falling like a stone. I think for now, I don't think we can be looking at sides like that. I think that can be the North Star, but ultimately 8 points, 9 with the goal difference, as I've already mentioned, is a pretty tough lead at this stage in the season with 15 games to go. That requires a lot of results to go in our favour outside of our control. What I would say is, with the likes of Leeds and Forest and the gap there, you're probably going to be having to focus on them. I think where we came unstuck was that game against Forest, which is one that we lost in the last minute to a dodgy penalty. And, it's really one of those that if you're going to not get relegated, that's something where you can't afford to lose. And, in classic West Ham fashion, we went and lost it, which was tough to take right at the end. But there was other games in that period. We had Wolves where we went away and lost 3-0. They're below us, but equally, it's another game where you're trying to pick up points against those around you to try and stem the tide. And I think, look, when you can't beat those around you, if you get the odd nice scalp, it doesn't really help you in the long run because you're still stuck there fighting it out with the teams around you, and that's what's going to, do for you.
And it seems like we're approaching, from a West Ham perspective, a bit of a post-Lucas Paquetá world now. Obviously, Bowen has been the star man for a while now, but who is the sort of real star in your team currently? I mean, from a Chelsea standpoint, I've been watching Matheus Fernandes quite closely. I've even seen rumours of interest from Real Madrid in the summer, which I think speaks to his form since he signed. Who are sort of the men to watch out for in this West Ham team at the moment?
Yeah, I think Bowen, as you've touched on, he's 63 Premier League goals for us now, 5 off the record. And I think, from a personal standpoint, if we are looking like we're going to get relegated this season, he's really going to be wanting to do everything he can to kind of beat that Mikel Antonio Premier League goals record of 68. He's 5 off that and he's got 15 games to do it. So that's 1 every 3. And I know that's not a relegation view, but if we are to go down, he'd probably be one of the first players out the door. So for me, look at Bowen because he's going to be even more motivated at the moment off the back of that goal against Sunderland to kind of try and get a few in the next few games. And he does actually like a goal against the top 6. He's got a very good record against teams like Chelsea, City, Arsenal. He's got quite a few goals against them. I don't know the exact numbers, but he's always done well in those kind of big games against the big 6. But yeah, look, elsewhere, Matheus Fernandes, he's done brilliantly recently, hasn't he? He's like, he could have had 2 against Sunderland on the weekend. And, we were talking about stemming the tide. He is one of those that, that you can rally around as the rest of the team. He is actually, a better player for us now than Lucas Paquetá has been in recent weeks. So, yeah, look, I love Lucas. He's like one of my favourite all-time West Ham players. He not scored the goal, but he gave the assist to Bowen in the Europa Conference League final. He's given us tons of moments like that of flair and quality over the past 4 seasons. Maybe he could have gone to City 2 seasons ago for 85 million if it wasn't for that betting scandal, and it could have been a better end. But yeah, look, I'll miss him. But I think, we've got a few players in. We've got the likes of Tati Castellanos. You've got the goal against QPR. We've got Pablo Felipe. I don't know what I think about him. He's a bit rough and ready. 20 million, probably, you'd want a bit more, but something to do with the agents there and the friendship and, the relationship with Nuno. So, look, I think the tools are there, but for me, look, I'm not going to get positive yet. If we can nick something on Saturday against you boys, then, there's every chance that we're going to start feeling even more positive. But whilst the teams around us are picking up wins, it's tough for us.
Indeed. And you've mentioned a couple of the new signings there. West Ham been very active in the January transfer window so far in an effort to replenish the squad in a bid for survival. You mentioned Castellanos, who I think scored a goal in the FA Cup against QPR in extra time. Pablo, not really sure what kind of player he is, but looks pretty clumsy from the outside looking in. And Adama Traore, it seems, is on the brink. Fabrizio Romano has just had to double down and confirm that is indeed happening. I've just seen on Twitter. So a pretty decent player. I know a certain cousin of yours, Daniel Light, will be pleased to see that one get sorted.
Yeah, look, I mean, he's one of those that is now the right time. Do we need another right winger? I don't know how old he is now, but I think, the best of him you'd have seen 3 or 4 years ago. And his numbers in the Premier League over the years haven't been that great. And look, the position he plays, right wing, is he going to dislodge Bowen? No, not at any point. So is he just coming on to kind of stick Bowen up front in the final 20 and then play on the right? I can't work it out. It seems like an odd move, and a move that Nuno's just kind of clinging on to people he knows, because at this point doesn't feel like the place that we necessarily need to strengthen. Look, if we were to strengthen, in my eyes, it would have to be the centre halves. Like we haven't kept a clean sheet under Nuno. 1 all season against Nuno in Forest away, 3-0 in August. And we can't do anything to stop conceding goals. Even Todibo and Mavropanos have formed a decent partnership in recent games, but I don't think they're the answer. I think if you were to get someone in like that Charlie Cresswell at Toulouse, he looks like someone that could really improve our chances of being more defensively solid. But with Adama, I'm not sold on that. I don't know what he's going to bring, and I don't see how he's going to make a difference in this relegation fight, to be honest.
Probably won't be much solace to you for me to say it, but he does feel like a pretty ideal player for you in the EFL. If you do
Yeah,
succumb to relegation, you could easily see him tearing up the championship and getting you a quick parachute landing back in the Premier League.
yeah, and that you might be right. That might be the view on it. Like he might be seen as a player we're getting in on. I don't know what kind of wages he's on, but I'm sure he's taking a pay rise from Fulham. Otherwise, why would he come? It's a strange one, isn't it? We'll see what pans out in the rest of the Premier League season. But like I said, I just don't see how he's getting into the team. But next year maybe paying dividends.
And switching focus to Saturday's match, you're going to be there. I'll see you there before the game, hopefully. But it would be good to get your thoughts on the circus, obviously, that is Chelsea FC and how you view this as a rivalry versus some of the other London clubs, perhaps the likes of QPR, Millwall, Arsenal, Tottenham, etc. How does Chelsea stack up in the eyes of West Ham fans?
I'll be completely honest. West Ham hate Chelsea. They do. I know that Chelsea fans would come and sit there and go, "Oh, we're not too bothered about you. We've got Arsenal and Tottenham above West Ham." But West Ham fans, in the main, hate Chelsea, and it's no secret, is it? I think in terms of the comparison of other rivalries, look, we Tottenham will always be the number one for West Ham fans whilst in the Premier League. Not mentioning Millwall until we get down there. And I think there's a more of a recent rivalry kind of building up with Arsenal. Everyone hates Arsenal across the Premier League. But I think with the Declan Rice move and just building up a bit of animosity there, the 6-0, the likes of certain things being posted on Twitter over the recent years, I think there's the
controversy.
It's one of those. But West Ham don't like Chelsea, and we'd love to get one over you on Saturday. I think I've been to Stamford Bridge 9 times now. I was looking that up the other day, and I've only ever seen us get a point. We could have seen a win if it wasn't for that disgusting refereeing decision from VAR against when Bowen taps Edouard Mendy and he makes out that he's been shot. But
as you know, karma swings around, and so it proved for West Ham in the same season with the old Souček handball save against Conor Gallagher.
I knew you were going to bring that up.
We won't dwell too much on that, but it would be remiss of me not to at least mention that. And in terms of Chelsea generally, from looking from the outside in, how do you see us in terms of our current trajectory and our fortunes? It's clearly a mess, and there's never a dull day. But great to get your thoughts.
It is a weird one, isn't it? I wouldn't know how to kind of quantify the path that Chelsea are on at the minute. Like one day you're making a signing, you've got a new manager, then Cole Palmer wants out, you're getting reasonably good results, but then you'll go and slip up and lose a game against a relatively easy side. Hopefully that happens again on Saturday. But it's just you can't have a specific thought process with Chelsea. Like they're just so all over the place. And look, the manager's come in, he's given a few weird interviews, the social media is all over him. He may come good, he may not, but he's certainly not the kind of Mourinho previous, ilk of manager that you've had in the past that's come to Chelsea and really kind of grabbed the club by the horns and won you league titles. Like he may win you the odd trophy, but he just seems a bit small fry to me. And like, I might be proved wrong on that. And, he might turn out to be, the second coming, but I think he's got a lot of forces at play at that club at the minute and a lot of people pulling in different directions. So, it'll be interesting to see kind of what comes of it.
Rings true, I think, of the sentiment within the Chelsea fan base, and nothing particular I can disagree within that assessment. So let's get your score prediction then for Saturday. Obviously, Chelsea have got a big midweek fixture tomorrow against Napoli to come. So heads will be focused firmly on securing top 8 qualification in the slightly unusual extended format of the Champions League. But big game upcoming nonetheless. How do you see it going?
I'd be lying if I didn't say I think we're going to lose, but like you say, with the Napoli game in midweek, things being a bit all over the shop with Chelsea. I know they're getting results, but the optimism's there, but I can't see anything other really than a loss. And I think that'll be a 2-1 loss if I'm completely honest. Probably a last-minute scrappy goal from some defender that I've never heard of before. And I'll be fuming walking down the King's Road after that.
Yeah, felt like there was real momentum you guys were building off the back of the 3-1 win against Sunderland, only to have perhaps the stuffing knocked slightly out of you by the 2-0 win on Sunday by away at Brentford. So it's really tricky when you're trying to get results yourself, but you're also casting one eye towards other teams within that scrap as well.
you don't want to be in the position where you're relying on other teams to kind of do you favors, but we're in that position and we're not getting those favors. So look, as you say, like it would have been a lot more optimistic, but even though we've won 3 on the spin, including a FA Cup tie, it's just hard to feel positive when we're in exactly the same position we were before these wins had even happened. So yeah, I'll stick with the 2-1 and hope I'm proved wrong.
I'm actually going to go for a high-scoring Chelsea win, but 3-2, I think, in favour of the home side. I think this is going to be a nervy one. There's going to be a huge amount of rotation, I think, over the course of this week for Chelsea, and West Ham will go into this, I think, with a little bit of confidence off the back of your recent uptick in form and some of the omens you've mentioned, like Bowen's scoring record against us, the rivalry between Chelsea and West Ham, and the controversy we've seen at times, as we've already mentioned. So I'm going to go for a 3-2 win, but I hope it will be comprehensive. We'll see.
I'm with you, Ryan. I fully expect there to be goals here, just like that reverse fixture at the Olympic Stadium. So I'm going to meet in the middle and call a 4-2 Chelsea win, with both Jarrod Bowen and João Pedro continuing their scoring runs, and the much criticised Liam Delap back to scoring ways in the Premier League.
See you there.
See you there.